Hello and welcome to StudyIQ. I am your friend Rahul Saigaonker. Let's continue our discussion of NCERT Science series. You already know that in our previous session, we began with NCERT Science Class 8. And in the last session, we discussed about Chapter 1, that is Crop Production and Management. In this session, we'll continue with the subsequent chapters. But for all those who are joining here for the first time, you already know on StudyIQ, we are running NCERT Science series, where I have already discussed with you the NCERT Science Class 6 and Class 7. These are in bilingual format on the main channel, StudyIQ IAS. You can always refer to these videos for more comprehensive understanding of complete science NCERTs. In fact, I'll be sharing a common playlist for all these chapters of science NCERTs on my Instagram channel, which goes with the ID Rahul SAI222, Rahul Sai222. In fact, if you search this also, you'll find multiple playlists which I have created on different themes which have been there, and you'll also find the NCERT series with this particular ID. My ID is common for the Telegram channel as well as the Instagram channel or any other social media handle, right? So you can always search for this. Now, here we have started Class 8 Science NCERT. In the previous session, I told you we spoke about crop production and management. Today, we are going to discuss Chapter 2, Microorganisms, Friend and Foe. A very important discussion because many a times MCQs do appear which are connected to microorganisms and they are quite easy. I call them freebies because they are very simple questions, but many a times students commit mistakes. In this chapter, we are going to talk about the meaning of microorganisms. Where do we find microorganisms? Different type of microorganisms. Are microorganisms our friends? Are they useful? Or are they our enemies? Do they harm us? And at the end of the discussion, we're also going to talk about one of the nutrient cycles. That is going to be the agenda today. So without any delay, let us begin and jump into the chapter. But before that, if you are UPSC Civil Services aspirant, do remember that StudyIQ has created a very comprehensive program for you from prelims to interview, batch 5. Now, StudyIQ will be hand-holding you right from day one. Your prelims preparation would be done for mains preparation. If you clear your prelims 2024, your entire mains residential program, its expenses would be borne out by StudyIQ. Your interview preparation would also be conducted. There would be multiple mock tests. There is already one-to-one mentorship. There is group mentorship. So you can start preparing comprehensively using this particular batch. The classes are starting from 13th May and the entire program is quite affordable, around 30K. If you want discounts, you can always use my code Rahul Live. Go to our website or download our app. Whenever you select the program, just use the coupon code Rahul Live and apply. You'll see the final price, which would be heavily discounted price, and then you can join. So I'll see you in the class as well. Right. Let's begin. As I told you, today's discussion is connected to microorganisms, and we're going to understand, are microorganisms our friend or are they our foe? Foe means enemy. So first of all, what are microorganisms? The name itself suggests microorganisms. That means they are not visible to our naked eye. If anybody asks you, can you see a microorganism, right? Directly through our naked eye, you cannot see a microorganism because it is in the size of micrometers. Now, if you go anything below that, you enter into the realm of nanotechnology, because from 1 nanometer to 100 nanometer, that comes into the domain of nanotechnology. But here, microorganisms, they are extremely small. But if there is a colony of microorganisms, they are quite visible to you sometimes, but not the individual organisms. Say, for sometimes you can see, especially the fungi. If there is a colony of fungi, it is quite visible. You must have seen it in bathroom, or you must have seen a colony of algae which looks green or bluish green, which you can tell these are algae. But again, to watch them characteristically as individual microorganism, you need the help of microscope, and that study, it's called microbiology. So if anybody asks you, do you compulsorily need microscope? I would say, for watching some of the fungi, I may not need microscope per se. A magnifying glass may be possible, or with a magnifying glass, it's possible to view some of the fungi. But in general, we need a microscope to study the microorganisms. And the next question, where do I find microorganisms? Everywhere. Take any sample. Take sample of a soil, observe it under microscope. Take sample of water, observe that under microscope. You will find these things. What do you find? You will find bacteria. Bacteria can be different shapes, right? In fact, in our subsequent discussion, we will build knowledge of these microorganisms in our NCERT 9th, 10th, and further in 11th. We'll talk more detail about these microorganisms, different kinds of bacteria, different kinds of other organisms, right? Bacteria are classified on the basis of their shape. You must have heard about a suffix, right, where we use suffix called as coccus for bacteria, right? You must have heard about this, coccus or bacillus. Bacillus is used as a prefix, coccus is used as a suffix. Whenever it is used as coccus, they are round kind of bacteria. Whenever you use bacillus, they are these rod kind of bacteria. So bacteria are prokaryotes. We know that prokaryotes means they do not have a true nucleus. They do not have any nuclear membrane. Their nucleus is not well developed. They might have cell wall for sure. Yeah, right. Next, you can have microorganisms like fungi. Now, many a times these fungi or a big colony of fungi is quite visible to you. Meaning, say, it's written here also. For example, if you keep a piece of bread somewhere, right, what is going to happen? After 2 or 3 days, you will see some sort of a white development or some small white kind of development over that bread. It's nothing but the colony of fungi, which is visible. The colony might be visible, but again, to study that single microorganism, you need microscope. You might also find algae. A colony of algae is also visible, or there is also microorganism family which comes from protists. They are called as protozoa. Amoeba, paramecium, they come under the category of protozoa. So microorganisms are everywhere. You'll see that you cannot see them directly with your unaided eye, except for some fungus probably, which you can watch using magnifying glass, but you need microscope for their study. Now they are generally categorized into different groups. There is a group of bacteria. Now these bacteria, as I mentioned, whenever the term bacteria comes, I want you to remember that they are prokaryotes. Prokaryotes means one that lack true nucleus. There is family of fungi, protozoa, algae. Now you must be thinking, that something is missing here, right? Something is missing, and you're thinking, where is this virus? See, viruses can also be put into the school of microorganisms, yes, but viruses, they are not living organisms per se. They are somewhere in between the living realm and non-living realm, somewhere in between that. Why? Because viruses compulsorily need a host. They need a host. Now, please remember, and note here that a virus needs a host which may be a bacterium, which may be a plant, which may be animal. Please remember, it can be any other living cell. That means a virus needs a host, and once it enters the host, it is going to use all the resources that the host has, because viruses, they are quite simple structures, although when you look at this, it looks as if some sort of an insect, because there are different kinds of the viral structures, because you see a kind of a protein layer around it, and their DNA material is simply safeguarded by a small protein layer or protein sheet, which is called capsomere or capsid, right? Now, these are generally harmful to us because they cause a lot of diseases. You already know. Example, the common cold, influenza, your cough, cold, or some can be more extensive or more dangerous, like the HIV virus. It gives you AIDS. There is polio virus. There are many other, smallpox, chickenpox. From the pox family, they also cause a lot of disease. But remember, viruses, I cannot categorize them and put them under the school of microorganisms per se, where we study bacteria, fungi, protozoa, algae. Viruses are something else. They are completely different. Okay, so we'll talk about viruses in our subsequent discussion when we talk about NCERT 9, 10 more extensively, right? But now our focus is predominantly on microorganisms, and especially good microorganisms and bad microorganisms. Now the question is, where do I find microorganisms? See, microorganisms are everywhere. In fact, when we say our population, how much is our population? Entire human, India's population is 140 crores. Entire human population, somewhere around 800 crores, a little more than 800 crores. How many microorganisms are there, right? There is, I wouldn't say there is no specific term to explain that, but in general, there is a term uses nonillion, okay, nonillion. And there is a different definition for that also. It's somewhere in the range of 10 power 50. In fact, 10 power 50 plus. The number of bacteria are in nonillion numbers. Huge numbers. They are present everywhere. Bacteria, algae, fungi, you can find everywhere. They are present in soil, they are present in air, they are present on my skin, ear, even inside my body, in the mouth, in the GI tract. Everywhere microorganisms are present. So you can find them everywhere. Many people think that microorganisms, they will not be present per se in colder environment. Nothing like that. Something that they will not be present in hot environment. Nothing like that. You can find them everywhere. You can find them in the ice cold climate. You can find them in the hot springs. You can find them in the deserts. You can find them in the marshy land. In fact, many people have a misconception that bacteria do not thrive in colder environment. They do thrive there also. Some specific bacteria, they like cold temperatures. Some specific bacteria, they like hot temperatures. Some specific bacteria, they like chemicals, right? For instance, some bacteria are acidophiles. That means they like acidic environment. Some bacteria are non-acidophiles. That means they like the basic environment or neutral environment. Some bacteria, they like specific chemicals. Say for instance, hydrogen sulfide or sulfur is needed. So you find bacteria or other organisms almost everywhere moving freely. Right? Now, what role do they play? Sir, you said they are present everywhere. You said they are present even in your body. So are they harming you? See, some might be harmful, some might be useful. That is the agenda of today's discussion. To understand these microorganisms, some cause disease, yes, but some are extremely beneficial for me. First, we'll talk about the beneficial ones, the good microorganisms. Now, what are these good microorganisms? You must have heard about them. We use them almost every day in our lives. As I told you, I need good bacteria. You must have heard about the ad, right? The ad that Shilpa Shetty comes up with, Yakult. You must have heard about probiotics, prebiotics, probiotics. What are those? Those are needed for your GI tract for healthy digestion. That means your gut has many prokaryotes, your gut has many bacteria which help you in digestion. There are many bacteria also in the mouth, in skin, everywhere. But a lot of bacteria are useful. A lot of bacteria, they cause harm. We need to identify them, right? So in our day-to-day life, we use so many microorganisms as a part of biotechnology. Every day we consume curd. What is that curd? Now, making of curd and making of bread, microorganisms are quite extensively used here. That's why I told you, in our day-to-day life, milk is converted into curd. By what? Milk is converted into curd by an organism called as lactobacillus, a bacteria. It converts milk to curd, and curd we consume as a food every day, right? So making of curd or making of bread. See, from wheat flour or from maida, I can make bread, correct? And for that, some kinds of yeast are used, some kinds of fungi are used specifically. In fact, I can use them to make cheese, right? In our previous discussion, we spoke about what bacterium? Propionibacterium shermani, to make Swiss cheese, all right? Or we can also use them to for commercial use, right? As I told you, I can make curd, I can make bread using these microorganisms. I can use them for commercial application, meaning I can make chemicals from them. I can create alcohol. I can create wine from them. Different kinds of yeast, right? Saccharomyces cerevisiae, that also we saw in our previous introduction. Saccharomyces cerevisiae is used for alcohol and wine making. I can make ethanol, methanol, different kinds of chemicals. In fact, this process wherein the sugar is basically converted into alcohol, it's called fermentation. And this entire process of fermentation was actually discovered by whom? Discovered by Louis Pasteur. You must have heard about Pasteur, right? Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur is known for pasteurization. He found out that you can kill the bacteria in the milk by boiling it, right? Pasteurization. We all know about pasteurization. The same Louis Pasteur, he found out fermentation. That means creation of alcohol. That yeast converts sugar molecules into alcohol. So to create foods, curd, bread, make alcohol, make chemicals for commercial use. We can also use them for medicinal purposes. For instance, we can use them to create antibiotics. Antibiotics are basically chemicals which are produced from specific microorganisms like say bacteria or fungus. They help us in production of streptomycin, tetracycline, erythromycin. So many antibiotics can be produced from these microorganisms. Apart from this, we can also develop vaccines. Now, what is a vaccine? You must have all gotten vaccination. right? When you were a child, when you're a kid, you must have taken the BCG vaccine, the polio vaccine, etc. How vaccination works? See, vaccination, it protects or it develops my immunity. How? What happens is, I take up one of the pathogens. Microorganisms which cause diseases to me, they are called as pathogens. Now I identify a pathogen, and my body already has immune system. So my immune system is going to fight against those pathogens. I have to train it that this pathogen is dangerous. So for that, what we do, we create a vaccine. A vaccine is a weakened pathogen or inactivated pathogen which is injected into my body. And now my body is going to produce antibodies against that pathogen. Since that is weak, it's not going to harm me. But my immune system has become intelligent now. Next time, when the real microorganisms tries to harm me, my immune system is going to attack it. That's how vaccination works. Vaccination basically is dead or weakened microorganism, a foreign pathogen which is induced or introduced in your body, so that your immune system invades those bad bacteria, bad viruses, bad microorganisms. So antibiotic development, vaccine development, you can also enhance soil fertility using microorganisms. We have seen many times in our previous interactions also, we have seen example of rhizobium, right? There are so many bacteria which fix nitrogen directly from the atmosphere into the soil. Rhizobium is one of the examples. Nitrogen fixing bacteria, nitrogen fixing microorganisms. So very helpful. Apart from that, they also clean environment. Now this is quite easy to understand. We see so much of dead material, decaying material everywhere. Where does it go? It is broken up, it is decomposed. And one of the biggest role of these microorganisms is to play a role of decomposers. They play a role of decomposer. That means they break the complex molecules and simply produce simple molecules. What are these decomposers? The prime example is bacteria. Bacteria acts as a decomposer. The major decomposers are fungus or fungi. Both of these, they are big decomposers, right? So they clean the environment also. So there are a lot of good things that bacteria does. Now we can use them in many other fields. In our previous interaction, we have seen we can use them as an agent of biological control. We can use them in biotechnology. We can use them in bioremediation, cleaning environment, all these things. Yes. But on the other hand, the bacteria can be bad, or I can say microorganisms can be bad, not just bacteria. I have to do the correction here, right? So microorganisms can be bad. Why? Because they act as pathogens. As I told you, for creation of vaccine, I did use them. But if they enter my body, they are going to harm my body. They are going to lead to diseases. That's why we see, especially the spread of communicable diseases, and these pathogens, it may be a bacteria, it may be virus, it may be fungus, etc. How do they spread? They spread from one person to another person through communication. It can be a simple cough. You must have seen that once in a family, somebody has got cough or cold, they sneeze, they cough. That means the fluids are released and the microorganism is now exposed. It can enter someone else's body. It can enter directly, or it can also enter through vectors or carriers. Now many a times we have seen there are so many carriers which take up this microorganism from one place to another place, because microorganism directly cannot travel. Yes, it can travel, or it can move from one place to another place via water, via air. Yes, but there are many times carriers or vectors here. For example, a simple housefly. You have a housefly. You see, housefly goes and sits on the waste metal or excreta, dead or decaying matter, which is the home for these microorganisms. It sits there and then it comes into your house. That means now the microorganism has entered there. Or say a mosquito. There's a mosquito. We have heard about the Aedes mosquito, Anopheles mosquito, right? These mosquitoes, they first of all they go to the person who is infected. They bite them, they suck the blood. Female Anopheles mosquito sucks the blood and then it bites you. That means the microorganism is transferred from one person to another person, or they may be transferred through food. For instance, you have prepared food, but that food has become stale, which is home of microorganisms, and you have consumed it. Now you will be infected with it. So you will see some sort of diseases. So many pathogens, many microorganisms, they cause diseases. For example, here some of the examples are given. Tuberculosis is caused by bacteria, right? Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It's caused by a bacteria, and the transmission is directly through air. Or measles virus, it gives you measles. Varicella virus, it gives you chicken pox, again through air or through some sort of contact. Polio is a virus, right? Myelocystis is a disease. Polio, it is spread by polio virus, which is spread through air or which is spread through water. That is why open defecation should not be done, because from the waste material, from the excreta, through air, through water, it can move and the infection will continuously spread. Disease like cholera, again, it is a waterborne disease, food or waterborne disease. Whenever there is a rainy season, spread of cholera is extreme. Vibrio cholerae is a bacteria which spreads cholera. Typhoid, you must have seen, typhoid is again waterborne. If you drink water, or if you are exposed to water which contains Salmonella typhi bacteria, you'll get typhoid. It makes your body extremely weak. It starts weakening your immune system itself. Hepatitis A, Hep A virus, again waterborne. Malaria, now malaria, very strangely, please remember, many people think that malaria is caused because of mosquito bite. Yes, right, you're right. If I give an option, malaria is caused by mosquito bite or some sort of microorganism, you need to understand the correct answer would be microorganism. Mosquito is simply a carrier. And which microorganism? It's a protozoa. It's a protozoa called Plasmodium, which causes malaria. But the vector or the carrier is your mosquito. So many microorganisms, they can be bad microorganisms. It can be, yes, it can be bacteria, fungi, even amoeba, protozoa. They can cause a lot of diseases. Not just in humans, they can cause diseases even in animals. You must have heard about anthrax. The scare of anthrax was quite prominent at the beginning of 21st century. Anthrax attacks. Terrorists used anthrax, Bacillus anthasis, to cause anthrax. It is transmitted directly through air, water, or direct contact, which threatens the throat, or which threatens basically the throat region of the animal, predominantly found in goats, etc. Apart from that, there is foot and mouth disease, which is caused by FMD virus, which is again spread through air or direct contact. Not just animals, not just humans, but even plants can get diseases from these microorganisms. Some of the microorganisms can be very helpful, but some microorganisms, they do cause diseases, right? There is citrus canker. You must have seen there is a bacteria, right? Xanthomonas bacteria. It causes citrus canker. You must have seen it on lemon or oranges, where you get some sort of canker on these fruits, right? You must have seen it. That is citrus canker. Its mode of transmission is again through air. You must have seen rust of wheat. It is caused by a fungi, again through air, seeds. You have yellow vein mosaic of your bhindi or okra. It is a virus, right? So viruses, bacteria, fungi, they can give diseases to humans, they can give diseases to animals, they can give diseases to even plants, right? Or else it can also lead to food poisoning. Now you must have seen food poisoning. You have prepared food, you have prepared rice, dal, chapati, but in summer season, you must have seen you have prepared it in the morning. By evening, your food becomes stale. It starts smelling a little sour. It tastes also a little sour. And if you consume that food, you are bound to get food poisoning. Why? Because now that food has become home for microorganisms, and these microorganisms, they produce various kind of harmful toxins which eventually harm your GI tract or your digestive tract. And remember, when I say microorganisms, please focus here. Yes, food poisoning can be caused by bacteria. Again, an example of this can be the Salmonella bacteria. It can be caused by fungus. An example of this can be the Aspergillus, right? Aspergillus can give you food poisoning. It can produce some sort of toxin which is problematic to you. Please remember, food poisoning can also be caused by viruses. Many people think that food poisoning is not caused by viruses, it is just the disease. No. Many viruses, they also cause food poisoning. A predominant example here would be viruses which cause you diarrhea, right? Say for example, the norovirus. An example of this would be the norovirus. Norovirus causes food poisoning, diarrhea. So it can be bacterial, it can be fungal, it can be any other thing, it can be any other microorganism. Please try to understand. If I ask you a question or create an MCQ where Food poisoning is caused due to chemicals produced by bacteria, fungus, virus, etc., etc. All the microorganisms which are harmful, they do lead to food poisoning. All right. Why? Because they produce some sort of poison or some sort of harmful toxin or a chemical which is not good for your health. Now the question is, sir, how do I prevent this? How do I prevent food from getting stale? How do I preserve my food? How do I ensure that it remains good, it remains nutritious? We use some sort of preservatives. It's called food preservation. Food preservation, it leads to reducing the activity of microorganisms. It also leads to enhancement or increasing the shelf life of the food. Now, how can we do it? One of the simplest methods that we use is we can use some sort of chemicals which act as preservatives. That means they reduce the activity of microorganisms, they enhance the life of food, the time period for which the food can be consumed. There are many kind of chemicals that we can use. Simply salt, sodium chloride can be used, right, which reduces, especially to preserve meat, fish, etc. We do use salt. Salting is used even on raw mangoes. Salting is used on your citrus fruits like amla, etc. Salt is used. You can use sugar also in your jams, jellies, squashes. You use sugar as a preservative, or else you can also use chemicals like what? Chemicals like sodium benzoate. Remember, sodium benzoate is an example of chemical preservative. There is sodium metabisulfite, that is also preservative. But apart from these, there can be many other preservatives. In fact, there is a long list of preservatives that we use these days. Whenever you buy any food product, I want you to do one thing from today itself. Develop this habit. Whenever you buy, say, a fruity juice, or say buy a chips packet, Lays, or anything, just turn that packet and see what are the ingredients of it and what kind of preservative is added in it. You will find some sort of a list like this. Sodium benzoate is a very common one. Apart from that, you also use benzoic acid, calcium sorbate, right? Erythrobic acid, potassium nitrate. Many such food preservatives are being used today. Remember, these days even antioxidants. Remember, antioxidants, they reduce the activity of microorganisms. They slow down the activity of microbes, and that is how they enhance the life of food. Many antioxidants like ascorbyl palmitate, butylated hydroxynosole, or butylated hydroxytoluene are used, right? Many such antioxidants are also used these days. Many of you might have a question, sir, am I consuming so much of chemicals these days? Yes, in your preserved food, for instance, if you're taking any packet of processed food, if you're taking any sort of chips, any sort of juice, for instance, just think, no, in summer season, right now there is a season of mango, but you get maza 365 days, right? So you get maza, you get fruity. Who comes for the ad? Amitabh Bachchan comes, no? He said, "Aam wali dildari," right? What is it? You get it for 365 days. How is it possible? It's possible through these preservatives only. Now the question is, sir, am I consuming these chemicals? Are they harmful for me? See, technically the answer would be no, because the amount of preservatives that you use or we use in chemicals, they do not pose a lot of risk to your health. But again, continuously, FSSAI, the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, they keep a track of these preservatives regularly, and those preservatives have to be within the limit which has been prescribed by the FSSAI. But I would suggest, or I would advise you to stay away from these processed foods, because it's a matter of choice. I cannot say that do this or do that. I can simply advise you, give suggestion that always go for fresh foods, right? Always go for fresh food, because fresh foods are always better. Of course, preservatives are used, they are monitored regularly, but they do not harm you too much. But if you have access to fresh food, why not go for fresh foods, right? That's the idea. All right, so food poisoning and food preservation. Many MCUs can be set up on this. Apart from these, we also use preservation by using different oils and vinegar. You must have seen, especially in pickle. Now, in pickle, there is too much of oil. In fact, when you take a spoon of pickle, there would be oil draining out of it. Why? Because oil is used as a preservative Whenever there is oil, the bacterial activity is not there or it is reduced. Vinegar is also used to preserve fruits, fish, meat. You can also go for hot and cold treatment, right? Hot and cold treatment. Either put it in the fridge. That's why when you keep something in fridge, it will stay for longer. That means the food does not turn stale. Why? Microbial activity is reduced. Or you can go for heat treatment. One of the classic example of heat treatment is pasteurization, as I told you, discovered by Louis Pasteur. What you need to do is simply take milk in the vessel, switch on your gas, right? Switch on your stove and heat it till 70 degrees Celsius. And at 70 degrees Celsius, just leave it there for, I'd say, a minute, just a minute, right? 1 minute, 30 seconds also. All the microbes would be dead. So that's why you must have seen during the summer season, the microbial activity is on the higher side. That's why what happens at your home? Milk is generally heated multiple times, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, once in the evening. Why? Because the microbial activity has to be reduced continuously. That's called pasteurization. Apart from that, we do a lot of storing and packing also, especially used for processed foods, especially used for dry fruits, etc. So packaging and storing these foods in airtight containers, they are going to increase the shelf life, right? So these are some of the methods of preservation, right? Let's move to the final point of our discussion from this chapter. We're talking about nitrogen cycle. Now, why I'm discussing this, why we are talking about this? Yes, of course, it's given in the NCERT, but what is the logic of talking about nitrogen when we are talking about microorganisms? Now, we all know, we have discussed about air. Our atmosphere has air, and in air, we have 78% of nitrogen and 21% oxygen, approximate numbers, correct? Now the question is, 78% nitrogen is already there in the atmosphere, then why do Indian farmers continuously use urea extensively? Why do they use urea extensively? Is it just because it's subsidized? Is it cheap? The answer is no. Of course, we have a lot of nitrogen in our air, but the same amount of nitrogen in our soil, it continuously depletes. Why? Because we are going for cropping. As I told you in the previous session also, I told you that this is soil. This soil has X amount of nitrogen which is needed for a crop to grow, right? So a crop is grown here, and what I do, I harvest this particular crop, and now I have turned it into food grain. So the nitrogen that was there in the soil, it has now gone into this food grain which I am consuming. Meaning soil is now deprived of this particular nutrient called nitrogen. That is why nitrogen is also called as a limiting nutrient. Please remember, if a statement comes, nitrogen is a limiting nutrient. Yes, because many people think, sir, how can it be a limiting nutrient? In soil, it is available in a limited quantity. In air and atmosphere, abundant. But in soil, it's less. Now the question is, sir, how does nitrogen enter soil? What happens? There is normal procedure. We all know about the normal procedure. Nitrogen from atmosphere, it has to be fixed into the soil. One is, yes, through volcanic activity, through weathering, etc. All these things happen. But nitrogen from atmosphere is fixed into the soil predominantly by two major processes. One is by lightning. Whenever lightning happens, please remember, if I ask you an MCQ where I suggest nitrogen is fixed from atmosphere into the soil, one, by microbial activity, that is why we are discussing this. Second one is lightning. Lightning, it brings nitrogen based compounds into the soil. Now apart from that, we do have, again, volcanic activity, etc. also adds to the nitrogen in soil, but I'm talking about atmospheric nitrogen being fixed into the soil. How? One is by lightning, and another one is by nitrogen fixing microorganisms which fix nitrogen from atmosphere into the soil. Now once it enters into the soil, what do? I grow my crops. Crop is going to use nitrogen. The plant or the crop takes up this nitrogen. I consume that plant. That means that nitrogen has now come into me. I eat it, I consume it, and that is why when the excretory system or the digestive system, ultimately the waste products, they contain a lot of urea, uric acid, ammonia. It again goes through waste material, dead and decaying matter, again enters the soil. Apart from that, there is one more arrow which is written here, and that is denitrifying microorganism. That is why I hope you understand here under the microorganisms chapter, we are talking about nitrogen cycle. You know why? Because microorganisms, specifically I can say bacteria or prokaryotes, they are a very important factor in fixing nitrogen or in the entire nitrogen recycling. So nitrogen cycle, a very important factor in nitrogen cycle is these microorganisms. Nitrifying microorganisms which fix nitrogen from atmosphere into the soil, and denitrifying bacteria or denitrifying microorganisms which directly from the soil they turn the nitrogen into atmospheric nitrogen gas. So when we talk about nitrogen cycle and microorganisms, this is the process. Mostly prokaryotes, I'm writing prokaryotes here because in nitrogen cycle it's just the bacteria which work predominantly here, bacteria. Some prokaryotes, some bacteria, they convert atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia. Some prokaryotes, some bacteria, they convert this ammonia into nitrites and this ammonia into nitrates also. Apart from that, some bacteria, they convert these nitrates directly into atmospheric nitrogen. Some of the examples are given here. There are ammonifying bacteria. That means atmospheric nitrogen is used to create ammonia. Some of the examples of that are Proteus, Clostridium, Pseudomonas, and Streptomyces. There is no need to fear or get intimidated. There is no need to fear by these names or get intimidated by these things. Okay, there is no need to mug up these names, but I want you to understand how exactly it is fixed. Sometimes, especially if I'm talking about NEET, probably these microorganisms and their names becomes very important for you. But for understanding, please see, nitrogen is converted into ammonia by ammonifying bacteria. These are the examples. And ammonia is converted into nitrites by some other bacteria, Nitrosomonas, Nitrosospira, Nitrosococcus, and Nitrosobolus. And these nitrites or ammonia is directly contributed into nitrates to nitrates or ammonia to nitrates by some of the bacteria called as Nitrobacter, Nitrospina, Nitrococcus. And denitrifying bacteria are Thiobacillus, denitrificans, and generally there is a suffix which is denitrificans here. Please see everywhere denitrificans. Wherever denitrificans comes, it's a denitrifying bacteria. Some of the species of Serratia, Pseudomonas, and Acromobacter, they also denitrify soil, denitrify nitrogen directly from soil into the atmosphere. Again, I'm repeating, there is no need to get intimidated by these names at all, but just understand the process. Focus on this particular thing. Under the microorganisms, we are talking about nitrogen cycle. In our subsequent discussions, we will talk about different cycles. In our previous discussions or previous NCERTs, we spoke about water cycle. We are talking about nitrogen cycle. In subsequent discussions, we'll also talk about other nutrients and their recycling. So that's the end of today's chapter, microorganisms, friend or foe. Right? In the next discussion, we'll talk about the subsequent chapters. And if you like this discussion, you know you can follow me on this particular ID. I told you on Instagram, I will share the playlist of entire NCERT series which you can refer. If you have not seen the previous classes, do watch them so that you get a complete or a wholesome idea of science lectures. Thank you for watching this again. Jai Hind.